Today's video does contain subject matter that some viewers may find sensitive, and as always, viewer discretion is advised. And if you have a story you'd like to send my way, just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And of course, thank you. Back when I was in middle school and high school, I liked to go to the mall with some of my friends to hang out. My mom wasn't big on letting me, a young boy, go alone, but when I was around 16, she started to get more comfortable with it. Or, at least, letting me walk around with my friends while she was shopping on her own. I was the oldest of 3 kids, so I think she was just protective, and nowadays, I can't say that I blame her. My friends and I never really did anything obnoxious or illegal. We never stole anything or caused problems for other people. We were young, and typically walked around as a group of 2 to 6, depending on who all could show up. I won't lie and say that we never got loud, but I don't feel like we were disruptive, as we were never told we had to leave. I'm just trying to lay this out a bit, as it made the situation that I was in even weirder. It was in November, because my mom wanted to go Christmas shopping, but since it was the weekend, I was home. My dad worked on the weekends too, but she didn't want me to have to stay home with my younger brother and sister, nor did I really want to. I didn't really have a problem with them, but I wanted to go do something as well. She agreed that we could go to the mall and I could walk around by myself since she would be there for me as well. My siblings were young enough that they didn't quite understand what the gifts were for, and my mom was sly enough to try to hide them as well. So, I called a few of my friends who also got permission to go as well, and we all met them up there. Once we got there, my mom gave me her normal list of rules. Told me to call her if anything happened, make sure to answer her if she called as well, and agree on a meeting spot at a certain time. Then I was finally released to hang out with my 3 friends that had showed up: Charlotte, Macy, and Quinn. My mom had given me about $25 to spend or to get lunch for myself and my friends, so we all just walked around to decide on what we wanted to buy. We went into a few stores, more so just browsing until we made our way to the little arcade that they had in there. One of the girls was given some money as well, so we all split our cash evenly so we had 5 apiece to spend, and had a little left over to get something to eat. While we were there, we noticed a guy walking around in a nice button-up shirt and pants. Every time I noticed him, he was looking over at us and almost staring at us, like he was concentrating. Like he recognized us, maybe, and he was just trying to remember who we were. He was also carrying around one of those standing dustpans and broom, and he was just randomly sweeping in places. I asked the others if they recognized him, and they all said no, too. We just thought it was some grumpy old man mad at us for having a good time. Maybe we were being a bit too loud for him or something. We got tired of being watched and we decided to leave early. We walked around to a few other stores, but out of my peripheral, I saw the same broom guy walking around us. Then, after about the 3rd or 4th time, I no longer felt it was a coincidence, and that this guy was following us. I also wasn't the only one to notice, as Macy said something quite loud. Like, why do I feel like we're being followed? As she looked right over at this guy. He made eye contact with us, and started walking away. I made the suggestion that we go find my mom to let her know in case this guy tried to do something, or thought that we were trying to do something. I called her, and she told us to meet her at the place that we had agreed upon. It was on the bottom floor, so as we walked over towards the escalators at the end of the hallway, there was a small walled-off area that had restrooms, a drinking fountain, an empty store, as well as an elevator. It wasn't used very often, so It was kind of hidden off to the side, but it was for those who weren't able to take the escalator typically. The girls said that they needed to use the restroom, so we stopped over there first. While I was leaning against the wall talking to Quinn, the elevator doors opened and, lucky us, it was the broom guy. I pushed myself off the wall and was about to walk to the opposite side where Quinn was when this guy grabbed me by the arm and started shouting at me. Quinn was yelling at me to let me go, and he just kept saying that I was going to be in a lot of trouble, and he shoved me into the elevator with him. While we were in there, he was gripping my arm so tight that it was hurting. He kept saying things like, "I know what you did. I was watching you the whole time. You kids have no respect for others, for the value of money, and I swear you will pay. You will own up." I seriously had no idea what he was talking about. We hadn't done anything but walk around and play games, which was when I first noticed him. He took me to this small room back up on the second floor that looked like it used to be some kind of old office. It had a cheap desk in it, 2 chairs, a filing cabinet, and an old TV. I tried telling him my mom was here and that she would vouch for me, basically, that I had done nothing wrong. Then, he started telling me to take off my clothes. When I refused, he said to give back what I had stolen. We just kept going round and round like this for a while before someone started banging on the door and I heard my mom's voice. I called back for her and the guy then approached the door and opened it, as he had locked it. My mom and a guy in a security-style uniform were standing there. I ran past them to my mom and the guy started asking what was going on. The broom guy was angrily explaining that he knew I was up to no good and that I and my friends had stolen something. Man, I have never seen my mom so angry at that point. She tore into this guy, yelling at him that I wouldn't do something like that. Basically, what ended up happening after that, the security guy made the broom guy sit in that room until the actual police arrived. The broom guy didn't even work there. He just thought he was helping by patrolling the area and stopping troublesome kids, I guess. My friends ran and told my mom, and someone else reported seeing the guy dragging me away and making a scene, and didn't think that it was right. And again, none of us had taken anything. My mom gave a huge speech to all of us, making sure that none of us had taken anything, but I knew that they didn't take anything either. I don't know if that was his whole intention, to just protect the mall, or if there was something more sinister he planned. But he even went to the trouble of finding a room he could lock us in, which was pretty creepy. Not to mention that he was adamant that I undress. Whatever it was, it ruined my chances of going to the mall alone anymore, but at least that guy was stopped. And I really hope that we never meet again. This happened when I was about 15, and I believe that would be around 2005. Forgive me for missing pieces in this story, as I'm trying to remember everything. It was a pretty scary moment for me that I don't bring up on a regular basis, so some things have been lost over time. My friend Hannah had just turned 16, and instead of having a huge party, her mom agreed to let her go to the mall with a few friends alone. So, she invited me and our mutual friend, Michelle. Hannah's parents were going to be running errands around the city. Michelle and I were in track together, so she stayed at my house after the meet the night before, and my parents dropped us off at the mall the next day. Both Hannah and my parents told us to call them when we were done, and they would come and pick us up. However, my parents also said that if I didn't call earlier, they would be back around 6 p.m. to pick us up. I had one of those little Nokia phones, prepaid, so it was only for emergencies. I usually just sent a quick text instead of calling, so It worked fine, and I felt cool having a cell phone at that age anyways. I'm not sure what Hannah's parents' rules were at the time, though, or if there were any, other than call when we were done. My parents, however, told us that we were not allowed to leave the mall. There was plenty to do there: food courts, restrooms, rest areas, and we had spending money, so there was no reason for us to leave anyways. My parents also trusted me to go there without adults. I'd been there many times before with my younger sister, and was always responsible, so they had no issues with the idea. Michelle's parents also trusted her with me, as they thought that I was smart and mature. I'm still close friends with Michelle, and her parents told my parents this. Anyways, just trying to lay out the rules that we had and what we had on us. So it was 3 of us, 2 of us with cell phones. Michelle's phone had broken prior to this event, and she hadn't been able to replace it yet. And we were dropped off at around noon, and were left to be the young adults with a sense of independence for a few hours. Since it was Hannah's birthday, we let her lead the way. We went to a few of our favorite stores, and after goofing around at the small shops in the walking areas, we made our way to the little ice cream stand. You know, the one with the frozen balled ice cream. And while we enjoyed our ice cream, we noticed 2 boys carrying skateboards and going into Spencer's. We all agreed that they looked about our age, and that they were cute, so we decided to walk back towards the store to see if we could get their attention. At this time, we were all excited to do this, if not maybe a bit shy at the time, though. We looked in the store and noticed that they were standing near the front, seemingly looking at a wall of t-shirts. Hannah made a loud noise, like a weird laugh, which got them to look over. Cue the random giggling and faking to quiet each other down. It succeeded in getting their attention, though, and we started walking quickly past the store. This was close to the end of the mall, so we took the elevator down. At this time, we heard someone shouting from above, and when we looked up, it was the same 2 boys. They mentioned for us to wait for them, so we stopped at the bottom. They introduced themselves, but I'm not sure what their names were now, so I'll call them Alex and Brett. They said that they were 16. They were taller than us, but we just thought it was because they were guys. They're gonna be taller than us, right? I had a brother that was 2 years younger than me and was almost the same height, so I didn't have any reason to think otherwise. We started talking and shared what school we went to. They said they lived in another county, so we didn't recognize the school that they mentioned. We continued walking together towards the other side. One of the guys, Brett, seemed to pay attention to me, which I didn't expect. I didn't often get flirted with, so I was a bit shy, and I didn't know how to respond to it. We continued walking until we got to another store that we walked around in, and then stopped in one of the side halls that had restrooms. The boys pulled out their skateboards and were trying to do tricks and show off. Someone came by and told us that we needed to stop and move along, so we continued walking. Alex then suggested that we go to the skate park that was nearby. He said that Brett had a permit, so they took his car here and we would all fit in it. Hannah was immediately all for the idea. Michelle seemed eager to go, but also looked to me for permission, in a way. I initially wanted to, thinking it'd be fun, but I also knew that I wasn't supposed to leave the mall. I was at that age where I didn't want to look lame and hold my friends back, so I agreed that I would go with them, but I wanted to at least call my parents and tell them where we were going. Hannah told me not to worry about it, saying we could just have them bring us back here before 6, and it would be like we never left. Michelle then begged me not to call because then she would have to ask her parents, and she knew that they would tell her no. And that's when Alex said that if I didn't want to go, I could always stay behind and wait for them to get back. The way he said it almost seemed mocking in a way. Like I was too scared or uptight, and like he didn't want me to go anyways. This, of course, upset me, and between Brett seeming to be into me and me not wanting to disappoint my friends, I decided to go. As we started walking towards the exit, I started to get the weird sense of dread, like something bad was going to happen. I didn't know if it was going to be something at the park, or maybe it was just potential trouble that I was about to get in. So, I thought I would give one more try of at least telling my parents. I pulled out my phone as we were walking to send a quick text when I was caught off guard by Brett coming up next to me and grabbing my phone. I was surprised, and I tried to be cool about it and ask for it back. But then, as he walked backwards so he could face me, he put my phone down the front of his pants and winked at me. Again, I hadn't really been given attention like this, not to mention we were only 15, so I quickly quieted down, as he teased me about turning red. I walked in silence with Brett now walking next to me until we got to the entrance. I was still feeling on edge about the situation, so I was desperately trying to find some way to stop us or delay us. I asked them before we left if I could use the restroom. My friend seemed fine with it, but Alex appeared to be annoyed. Brett offered to walk me to the restrooms, but they were pretty close to the doors, so I declined his offer. I quickly walked off and waited in there trying to figure something out. I thought maybe that I could stop someone that came in there for their phone, or maybe get Hannah's attention and talk her into letting me use her phone. However, after several minutes of no one coming in, I decided to walk out. Unfortunately, my friends were nowhere to be found. I walked around the entrance, then outside, and they were seemingly gone. I was scared, upset, and offended. I assumed they left me when I went to the restroom. I started crying a bit when a woman noticed me and asked me if I was okay, or if I was lost. I vaguely explained that I had lost my friends, and I asked to use her phone as I didn't have mine. I remember calling, expecting to be in a lot of trouble, but instead my mom just sounded worried, and said that she would be right there. The lady waited for me until she showed up, and explained what she had witnessed to my mom as well. Then I explained everything to her that happened. She was immediately worried about the other girls, but also agreed that I did the right thing by not going. Things moved pretty fast at this point. I know my mom tried to call my cell phone, and it would just ring until it went to voicemail. She called the cops and had people looking around the mall and doing pages for them in case they just ran off somewhere. She also called Michelle and Hannah's moms to tell them what had happened. They showed up at the mall too, and after we all drove around the mall and even the skate park that they had mentioned. They weren't there either. I had to give a description of what the two boys looked like, and the rest of that evening was nerve-wracking. We went home and I continued to try calling both my phone and Hannah's, and they both started going straight to voicemail, which frightened me even more. I didn't want to sleep that night, as I was worried that something had happened to them, and I couldn't help but feel like I should have done something more to stop it. My parents kept assuring me that I did the right thing, as I was at least able to provide descriptions. It wasn't until the next day that we finally got an update. This was information that I got both from my parents and Michelle and Hannah after I was able to see them again. When they got to his car, they learned it was some old, beat-up van, soccer mom style. However, when they got in the sliding door, Alex jumped in the back with them and immediately demanded them not to scream. And he pulled out a knife and tied their wrists and legs together, threatening if one of them tried something, they would kill the other one. Then they took off, driving around, and they began fighting over where to go. During this, Brett apparently lost control of the vehicle, flipping it over a small embankment. Alex was actually killed after being ejected from the van, and somehow my friends made it out with minor injuries. The boys had both phones and had turned them off, which is why we weren't able to get a hold of them. And Brett had been knocked unconscious, so they all just had to lay there praying that someone would show up. Thankfully, someone was driving by later that night and saw them and called for help. When Brett finally came to, he explained to the police pretty quickly what had happened. They wanted to try to kidnap someone, so they brought some rope and duct tape from their home, and that was about as far as they had planned. They didn't know what they wanted to do from there, or even where to take them. So that's when their plans started to deteriorate. I don't remember the charges that Brett ended up getting, but I do remember that he was tried as an adult, because he was actually 18, not 16 like they claimed. Michelle was not allowed to go anywhere unless there were adults with us, and she wasn't allowed to hang out with Hannah anymore. My parents still allowed me to go shopping without adults, and even with Hannah, as they did trust me, but they said that if she ever tried that again, I was supposed to make a scene and do whatever I needed to do to get out of it, and to stop her too. Hannah continued being quite the risk taker, so my parents were a bit cautious of her. Her parents weren't even that worried about the situation, which I know speaks a lot too. Anyways, overall this situation was scary, and I'm very glad that I trusted my gut. You just can't always trust someone's true intentions, no matter how normal it seems. Oh, and I also did get my old Nokia phone back, and it actually wasn't damaged at all. Back when I was 16, I started working at a department store in our local mall. I worked there for a few years after high school just because I enjoyed the job and the pay was decent. I started as a cashier and actually became a floor associate. It wasn't a commission job, thankfully, but I did enjoy being able to walk around, help people, as well as clean and organize the shelves. As expected, since it was a retail store, we had to take those computer trainings on what to do in emergency situations. The ones that you glaze over and never expect to have to follow through on. And this took place after I had graduated, though. It was actually a Sunday, so we were closing early. I was in the women's section folding up the shirts that were displaced on the shelf, and this was also close to the front of the store, making me also close to the register. The cashier had just gone to break, and I agreed to go over to that section to watch the register until she got back. At this point, since we were closing in about 2 hours, it was just me, another floor associate, Marco, the cashier, Sam, and the store manager, Will. I assumed that Marco was closer to the back of the store because I couldn't see or hear him. I had one customer that I rang up, and another one that I remember seeing come in, but they hadn't left yet. So, while I was folding, I heard a loud bang, making me jump. It came from outside of our store, and all I could think of was that it sounded like something large and heavy crashing onto the floor, like maybe a trash can. I just remember that I stood there for a moment, and noticed that after the loud sound, it was eerily quiet, other than the very soft music playing over the intercoms. Usually you hear people walking and talking, but it was unsettling. Then I heard the sound a second time, which was followed by screaming. I started to walk over towards the door when I saw a guy running from the left, and he looked terrified. Something told me to get away from the door, so I started to swiftly walk towards the back when I heard the sound again. That's when I finally realized I was hearing shooting. The fear finally hit me, and I fell to the floor crawling when I saw Will come out of the back. He was motioning for me to get behind the counter, and I didn't hesitate. I looked around the side to see him running, trying to pull the barred gate down, when I saw someone run up to the door and start yelling. I immediately dropped down and held my knees to my chest. I heard them yelling about getting back up, hands up, and Will was trying to tell them to calm down and not go through with this. He continued yelling, so he walked over to the cash register and began unlocking it. As he was emptying it, the other guy asked where the girl was at the cash register. He said they already took off through the back when we first heard the shot. The mall was only one story, so each store had a back emergency door, so it was definitely possible, and for their sake I hope that they did. After he finished, I assumed the guy didn't leave because Will stood there and started to say something like, "I swear it's empty," when I heard another shot and Will fell to the floor. It made me scream, but I heard the guy run out of the store too. Everything was a blur after that. I remember trying to help Will. Marco came out from the back and helped as well, and it just kind of spiraled from there. Lots of talking and people coming and going. My parents showed up, freaking out, understandably, as I still lived with them too. I didn't work for a few days after that. In fact, everyone that worked that night was off. To my surprise, the place did actually pay for therapy for any of us that wanted it. The suspect didn't get far, though. Thankfully, when others heard the first and second shots, they called for help immediately. So the cops were at the door when they tried to escape. Will was always a great manager, and after hearing that he was going to be okay, and was actually going to return to work, it made me feel like I could go back too, even though I thought about quitting. I continued to work there for a few more years before I got a job in my field. I took every single one of those safety training classes absolutely serious from that moment on, though. I used to live by a pretty popular and big mall in the Midwest. I'm a stay-at-home mom with, at the time of this event, a 7-year-old and an 18-month-old. It was early December, and we actually got a lot of snow. Ellie was getting a bit stir-crazy, being outside for so long, but I didn't want the baby, Ian, to be out in the cold for too long. We lived in an apartment complex, so we didn't have our own yard, so I wasn't comfortable with her playing outside alone. I decided to take us all to the mall for a few hours while my husband was working. We could go through the stores and do some holiday shopping, as well as let Ellie play around and burn through some of her energy. I had a 2-seater stroller in case she got tired, and I loaded everything up, and we started walking around. We went to a few stores before Ellie demanded that we get lunch. When we were eating, I did as I normally do and paid attention to our surroundings and what was going on. I noticed a guy sitting at a table diagonally from us. He had a small container of fries that looked like he just got it, as it was full, and he was writing in a notebook. I noticed some other people nearby too, but then I turned my attention back to Ellie. After we finished eating, I got us all cleaned up, and as we were walking away, I noticed the guy was still sitting there, seemingly spacing out. But then he would start writing again. He also hadn't touched his fries. Again, just something I noticed, and we decided to carry on. On the bottom floor, there was a small play area with soft, cushioned squares, some tunnels to crawl through, and even a big slide. I agreed to stop so Ellie could play for a little bit, knowing we probably wouldn't be here too much longer before she started to get tired. I got to a bench, and since Ian was asleep, I went through my bag to try and condense them some. I also managed to sneak in a few things I got for Ellie, and I wanted to hide them better. This whole time, I could see her from any part of the play area, even when she was in the tunnel, as there were slots and little windows all along it. She was going down the slide on the opposite end when I noticed that same guy from the food court. I knew that it was him, as I saw the same green-covered notebook that he had folded and put into his pocket. This is when I became a little suspicious. This was a play area for small kids. The store on one side was Build-A-Bear, and the other side was a Claire's, which was more of girly jewelry accessory store. He was alone in the food court, and I never saw him with anyone, so I found it kind of odd that he was hanging around this area. So while I was watching my daughter, I was also watching him to see if a kid or someone else approached him. Unfortunately, no one ever did. I just watched him pace back and forth along the wall, looking into stores like he was looking for someone, and then looking over at the playground. And when he did look over at it, he seemed to fixate, and would freeze in place watching it. At one point, we finally made eye contact, and when he noticed that I noticed him, he seemed to walk away and into a different nearby store. My first thought was, if you weren't up to anything weird, why would you walk away so quickly when you were noticed? So, I called Ellie over, and while asking how she was doing, I brought up what I had talked to her in the past about stranger danger and what to do. She's a very smart girl for her age, so she catches on to things pretty quickly. There's no hiding things from her. When I mentioned this, she actually asked me what was wrong, and when I tried to tell her nothing, she told me how she thought the one guy was weird and said she didn't like him. I had a feeling that I knew who she was talking about, so I decided it was time for us to go ahead and report him. I put Ellie in her seat, much to her pleading, and just went the opposite way of the man. We went into a children's clothing store, and I asked one of the girls working there if they could call for security to potentially report an incident. She obliged, and they showed up pretty quickly. I told them what had happened, gave a description of the guy, and the store that he went into the last time that we saw him. They said they would look around for him, but of course, unless something actually happened, or he acted on anything, they couldn't do much. My thought was that if he'd scurried away just by making eye contact with me, that maybe security would spook him enough to leave. There was nothing good coming out of him being around kids. At least that's how I felt. I gave them my information and we went back to shopping. I was ready to leave at that point, but Ellie wanted to look around this store because they had dress-up stuff, and I swear that girl collected every Disney princess dress there was. While we were looking, I actually ran into a friend of mine, so we started talking for a little bit. When we finally finished up, we started walking to the front, when I noticed one of the girls running to the front and one closing the gate, basically locking us in. This scared Ellie a bit, so I had to try to calm her down, while also trying to figure out what was going on. I found the girl that I originally talked to about security to find out what was going on. She again asked me for a description of the guy, and said they had received a code for a missing child. When that happens, all the doors are locked and the stores are locked down to try to prevent anyone from taking said child. That was terrifying. I thought our intuitions were right, and it had to be this guy. I was thankful that I had both my kids with me, but I felt horrible that there was someone out there that may not have noticed him, and is worried sick that their baby is missing in a huge mall. I called my husband to tell him what was going on, as we were locked in there for maybe half an hour, and he was going to be off work soon. He said he was going to meet us at the mall to make sure that we got out safely. I believe that we were locked down for close to an hour before they finally opened back up. However, I wasn't allowed to leave yet, as security and cops asked me to identify the guy. They took me into the security room. They had me peek in, and sure enough, it was the same guy. I found out that they had heard a little girl screaming and crying in a bathroom alone. It was the missing girl. She described the same guy that I saw, and they wanted to confirm that it was, in fact, the same person to get a better idea of the time frame. And that was about another hour before I was finally able to leave. I got outside to my husband at the entrance, and he hugged me and Ellie so tightly. It truly was a scary moment, being a parent, and it made me realize how quickly your life can change. So, teach your kids what to do around strangers, and to never be afraid to scream, kick, and fight. And always be sure to keep your eyes peeled. You could save your own life, or someone else's in the process. So this was a collection of creepy mall stories. A genuinely frightening collection of stories that take place in the large buildings where retail establishments exist. I don't know what else to call malls, to be honest with you. We don't really have any malls around here anymore. I think there's still one. It's, I don't know. I feel like the last time I went to it, it just didn't have much going for it. I know there's still, like, the big name stores, like, Macy's? Is that a store that exists? I don't know. It had an American Girl store, but I think it's a sandwich shop now, so... Anyways, that's the... Oh, Borders. Not Borders, no. Borders is gone, Raven. It's not coming to me. You know the store I'm talking about, the bookstore that still exists. Barnes & Noble. There it is. Anyways, hopefully you enjoyed these stories. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button. If you didn't, you can hit the thumbs down button if it makes you feel better. No problem there. If you really liked what you heard and you're new to the channel, consider hitting that subscribe button. That would mean the world to me. Yeah. The other thing that would mean the world to me is if you considered leaving me a comment down below. And make sure that as you're leaving a comment, this is just a request on my part, that you're giving a thumbs up to the other comments down below. Just hitting the thumbs up on people who comment that have nice things to say, or just comment, random things. You could thumbs up the rude comments too if you want. Doesn't bother me any, but just make sure you're giving that thumbs up to the people that leave good comments too. Just a thought, okay? Just, whatever. Anyways, hope you all have a beautiful day, and I hope I do see you all on the next video. I'm going to stop before I just ramble on forever. But of course, my friends, until that day arrives, sleep well.